50 soldiers dead. No warning, no survivors. On the morning of July 29, 2025, an elite unit of Burkina Faso's military was erased in a single, silent ambush. Communications fell dark, leaving defenders cut off and helpless as the attack swept through, and not a single distress call pierced the night. This was not the first ambush in the nation's turbulent history, but it was by far the most devastating, and its echoes would soon shake Africa's political landscape.
By dawn, 50 families mourned, and a nation reeled in disbelief. Mothers wept in quiet courtyards, fathers clenched fists beside empty beds, and children asked questions for which there were no answers. But grief quickly curdled into suspicion. Who possessed the resources, the nerve, and the precision to engineer such a flawless massacre? Was this the hand of ruthless terrorists, or the calculated strike of foreign powers sending a chilling message?
The evidence was haunting. The attackers moved like phantoms, every shot premeditated, every step deliberate. Survivors from nearby villages reported hearing nothing but the faintest rustle before the first explosion. Most chilling of all, the military's radios and surveillance went dead minutes before the first bullet. Was that luck, or the signature of someone with rare technical mastery? Historically, such precision is rare. In 2004, a similar communications blackout preceded an attack on Sierra Leonean peacekeepers, ultimately traced to foreign-supplied jamming technology. The parallels were too stark to ignore. In the case of Burkina Faso, experts quickly noted this was not the work of ragtag bandits. As the shock wave spread, so did the questions. This was no random act. The timing was too exact, the silence too absolute. The operation reeked of orchestration, not chaos. A warning shot in a global game where Burkina Faso was suddenly a pawn, or perhaps a player. In the streets, in government corridors, and across international news feeds, one truth emerged. This was not only a tragedy, it was a crossroads for the nation and for Africa itself. What happened here would ripple far beyond Burkina Faso's borders, reshaping alliances and exposing the fault lines between sovereignty and subjugation. The world watched, uncertain. Most saw only loss and fear. But for those who looked deeper, there was something else, a spark. Ignore this moment, and you risk missing the birth of a new era, where a nation dares to seize its own destiny. Let us retrace how this single attack ignited a movement for African self-determination and unity, and why its lessons may one day be taught alongside the great turning points of world history. The days that followed brought questions, but also the first signs of transformation. President Ibrahim Traoré faced an impossible choice, and the world would soon see his answer. What line did President Traoré refuse to cross, and why did disaster follow so swiftly? In the tense days before tragedy struck, President Ibrahim Traoré made an audacious stand. He rejected not one, but two major invitations from Western powers. The first was an official request from the United States, an invitation to a prestigious ceremony wrapped in diplomatic pageantry yet laced with subtle threats. Traoré's reply was immediate. He declined, making it clear to the world that Burkina Faso would not be used as a pawn, nor would it bow to foreign choreography. Soon after, a delegation representing a powerful organization with deep American ties arrived in Ouagadougou. They came armed with promises and veiled warnings, but their mission failed. Traoré dismissed them, signaling an unambiguous message. Burkina Faso would not yield, regardless of incentives or intimidation. His defiance echoed beyond the palace walls. This echoed, in some ways, Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah, who in the 1960s famously turned down foreign aid offers that would have compromised his nation's independence. Days later, before the dawn of the 29th of July, a nightmare unfolded. In the eastern frontier, a vital military post was struck by a meticulously coordinated ambush. There was no advance warning, just a sudden, brutal assault, executed with chilling precision. Chaos erupted. The defenders fought desperately, but in the confusion, two critical safeguards failed. Surveillance drones went blind, and communications collapsed. It is reminiscent of the infamous Tet offensive in Vietnam, where a surprise attack upended assumptions and changed the course of war. By sunrise, a grim tally emerged. 50 soldiers lay dead. The nation reeled, searching for answers. Was this merely the work of faceless terrorists, or the cold hand of reprisal? As grief spread, so did suspicion. In markets, mosques, and crowded streets, whispers grew into conviction. On radio shows and social media, one question burned. Was this devastation truly random, or was it punishment for Traoré's refusal to submit? The attack felt too precise, its timing too perfect. Political analysts drew parallels to the 1961 assassination of Patrice Lumumba, where international interests played shadowy roles behind tragic national events. The capital mourned, schools shuttered, businesses closed, and flags hung low. Ouagadougou was a city draped in sorrow. Yet President Traoré did not retreat to safety or comfort. He walked the streets in his fatigues, standing shoulder to shoulder with his people, his grief and anger as raw as theirs. His presence recalled the actions of Abraham Lincoln visiting Civil War battlefields, or Nelson Mandela comforting grieving families after apartheid violence. This public display of solidarity transformed collective pain into determination. Across the country, people demanded not only justice, but a future shaped by their own hands. Calls for vengeance gave way to calls for self-reliance. Traoré's resolve, tested in tragedy, galvanized a movement. Failing to see this pattern, outside pressure, sovereign refusal, and sudden violence, means missing the real struggle defining Africa's future. The ambush was not just an attack, it was a catalyst, forging new unity and resolve in the face of foreign designs. Similar moments turned tides in other nations. The Salt March in India, the Soweto uprising in South Africa, the Zapatista rebellion in Mexico. Each time, a single event galvanized the many. As Burkina Faso grappled with its loss, Traoré's stance drew international scrutiny. The world watched, wondering if this moment would spark true change, or provoke even greater dangers. As the world watched for Burkina Faso's capitulation, President Traoré unveiled an audacious countermove, one no rival or ally could have predicted. Rejecting outside rescue, Traoré's government ignited a revolution within. Local engineers and technicians, working in utmost secrecy, launched the nation's first homegrown drone program. Not a single foreign consultant was allowed. Every blueprint, every wire was burkinabé. For the first time, the country's defense pulse beat to its own rhythm. The project's secrecy and local focus recalled Israel's clandestine development of its own weapons industry in the 1950s when facing embargoes and isolation. Security around the production sites was absolute. Armed guards, rotating codes, and silent oaths forged a near-impenetrable shield. The team's motto, vigilance and self-reliance above all, became a code of honor. Each drone was more than a weapon. It was a declaration that Burkina Faso would never be caught unprepared again. Practical steps included the creation of a national engineering scholarship, partnerships with technical universities, and the establishment of a civilian oversight committee to ensure transparency. The effect rippled instantly through society. Military enlistment soared by more than 60%, as young men and women glimpsed a future worth fighting for. Operation Col Pelgo swept the nation. Civilians trained in defense, borders fortified, artificial intelligence deployed for surveillance. Villages became strongholds, communities transformed into a single vigilant force. Similar to Finland during the Winter War of 1939, mobilized every citizen for defense, Burkina Faso's strategy depended on involving the whole country. Volunteer corps were set up in every province. Training manuals were printed in local languages. Retired officers led workshops in rural schools. In every corner, the message was repeated. Every burkinabé was now a guardian of the homeland. In a daring pivot, Traoré redirected 300 million United States dollars, once earmarked for foreign aid, into domestic defense innovation. The message was stark. Burkina Faso's safety was no longer an outsourced commodity. This reallocation mirrored the economic reforms of South Korea in the 1960s, where national priorities shifted from aid to self-reliance, resulting in decades of rapid growth. Women and civilians surged into the new security movement. National defense was no longer the duty of soldiers alone, but the shared project of an awakened people. Security was recast, not a function of uniforms, but a thread binding every citizen to the nation's fate. Village women organized food supply chains for troops. Market vendors formed information networks to report suspicious activity. Hunters and blacksmiths adapted their skills for defense tasks. Yet the stakes were razor sharp. Success could ignite a wildfire of African self-determination. Failure would deepen dependency and fracture the country's fragile unity. The world's eyes were fixed on this experiment, some with hope, others with dread. But the world was watching, and not everyone was ready to let Burkina Faso chart its own course. Shadows began to gather on the horizon. Foreign embassies held emergency meetings. Satellite images showed increased surveillance from international actors. Cyber attacks on government servers spiked, but the new burkinabé cyber defense units, trained in partnership with local universities, successfully repelled every incursion. As news cameras captured it live, Russian boots touched down on the red earth of Burkina Faso. Yet, President Ibrahim Traoré never loosened his grip. Power remained in African hands, the world watching for any sign of a puppet regime, and finding none. There were no masked mercenaries stalking the night. Instead, Russian military instructors arrived in crisp uniforms, their purpose announced for all to see: to train and empower local forces with cutting-edge tactics. The message was defiant. No more outsourcing security, no more depending on foreign patrons, and no more open door for interference. What started as a handful of training squads grew with startling speed. Within mere weeks, soldiers from Mali and Niger crossed borders to participate. For the first time in living memory, 3 independent armies coordinated openly, sharing intelligence and synchronizing maneuvers. Phone lines buzzed between capitals that once regarded each other with wary suspicion. Former rivals became partners, bound by urgent necessity. Then, with global eyes fixed on the region, the Sahel Security and Sovereignty Pact was born. This was no hollow treaty. It created an integrated intelligence grid and a unified rapid response force, authorized to cross borders at a moment's notice. For millions across the Sahel, it was a homegrown blueprint for survival, designed by Africans, for Africans, and accountable to no foreign power. This new alliance drew inspiration from historic defense pacts such as NATO or the African Union's peacekeeping efforts in Darfur, but with a crucial difference: its engine and control were fully African. Joint exercises simulated border incursions, rescue missions, and humanitarian operations. For the first time, burkinabé officers led multinational task forces, their authority recognized by their peers. The world's reaction was swift and sharply divided. Western outlets, which had once lauded Traoré as a reformer, turned on him overnight. Headlines warned of foreign manipulation and dangerous new alliances. Policy experts published urgent analyses declaring the Sahel was slipping from the West's grasp. Diplomats whispered about frozen aid, looming sanctions, and the cost of defiance. On the streets of Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey, the reaction was the opposite. As Western condemnation mounted, support for Traoré surged in city squares and across social networks. The African Union's silence only stoked frustration, fueling a viral campaign for a truly Pan-African response. Young activists demanded the continent speak with one voice, for dignity, for sovereignty, for the right to choose their own path. For the first time in decades, a distinctly African security architecture emerged. not designed in Washington, Paris, or Moscow, and not tied to the strings of former colonial masters or distant donors. This was an alliance shaped by shared sacrifice, a hunger for unity, and a stubborn refusal to submit to outside dictates. The stakes soared. As the Sahel bloc solidified, Western interests faced an existential threat. Aid was suspended, investment offers rescinded, foreign advisors quietly withdrawn. But momentum did not slow. A generation raised on dependency was now rewriting the rules, choosing agency over acquiescence and dignity over charity. Yet these changes ran deeper than military drills and security pacts. The revolution unfolding in Burkina Faso was cultural, economic, and, most of all, deeply personal. In the wake of tragedy, artists, musicians, and teachers took up the call for national dignity. New songs swept the airwaves, blending traditional rhythms with powerful lyrics about unity and resistance. School textbooks were rewritten to include recent events, ensuring that future generations would understand the cost and value of sovereignty. But as hope soared, new dangers gathered on the horizon. Not everyone was ready to accept an Africa that refused to be controlled. Foreign media launched misinformation campaigns, attempting to portray the government as unstable. Attempts were made to bribe local officials, but anti-corruption task forces, newly empowered by civil society, exposed and thwarted these efforts. From factories to prayer halls, from art studios to nighttime patrols, Burkina Faso's awakening runs far deeper than the hum of surveillance drones. The core of the revolution beats within the people themselves, reaching every dusty alley and sunlit square. Artists, faith leaders, and ordinary citizens ignite a surge of unity that no imported technology could ever deliver. Murals bloom across city walls, bold with visions of resilience and hope. Children in crowded classrooms sing new national anthems. Across towns and scattered villages, national days of prayer gather thousands, Muslim, Christian, and animist, standing together in solemn anticipation and strength. This togetherness is not just symbolic, it is fiercely practical. Schools plant memorial trees for those lost, letting their roots become living tributes. Communities rally behind local defense units, offering whatever they can: homemade tools, sacks of grain, bundles of first aid supplies. Women, hunters, blacksmith, market vendors all step forward, treating the nation's security as a collective civic duty. Defense is no longer the military's lonely burden. It belongs to every citizen with something to give. In rural areas, elders organize night watches, while youth groups run first aid training sessions. Civilian defense groups and volunteer patrols multiply, shifting the national story from one of suffering to one of fierce agency. Youth sign up to train. Retired elders teach hard-won lessons in bushcraft and vigilance. Fear fades, replaced by a clear sense of purpose, by the knowledge that dignity is not a gift, but a daily construction, built together. Internationally, President Traoré's image spreads past the borders. In cities from Bamako to Kinshasa, his call for African sovereignty inspires crowds at rallies, his face painted on banners and chanted in slogans. It becomes clear, this is no longer just Burkina Faso's struggle. It is the drumbeat of a continent, refusing to be defined by foreign hands or outside agendas. The stakes now rise beyond military defense. The real change is internal. Should this unity persist, Burkina Faso's dignity will be unbreakable. If it fractures, new threats, foreign or domestic, will find entry. The lesson is unmistakable. A nation's spirit, woven together, is its strongest shield. But unity, once kindled, must be defended as fiercely as any border. As the world watches, the next test will reveal whether this new resolve can truly endure. The examples of Rwanda's post-genocide reconciliation or Ethiopia's Grand Renaissance Dam show that unity, though hard-won, is never permanent. It must be renewed through vigilance, inclusion, and honest leadership. Burkina Faso did not ask for permission to be free. In the theater of history, eyes are fixed on those who seize their own fate. The world remembers the American colonies declaring independence, the Vietnamese ousting colonial rule, the Indian subcontinent breaking free from imperial chains. Now, the world witnesses an African nation daring to rewrite its own destiny. Remember this: no liberation is ever handed down by those who profit from your chains. On the 29th of July, 2025, as dust settled over the bodies of more than 50 soldiers, the world waited for Burkina Faso to bow its head. But the nation looked up, and the tremor was felt across a continent. In that hour, the rules changed. Burkina Faso did not wait for pity or outside intervention. They alchemized tragedy into purpose and isolation into invention. President Ibrahim Traoré refused to seek approval from Washington, Moscow, or Beijing. He would not let distant handshakes script his people's future. In the days before the ambush, he turned away foreign dignitaries, spurned ceremonial praise, and declined every hollow medal. To outsiders, this seemed like the gamble of a desperate state. But beneath the surface, the country was already steeling its resolve. National grief became iron determination. Shame forged the blueprint for sovereignty. In shadowed workshops of Ouagadougou, engineers and soldiers transformed pain into progress, building technology answerable to no foreign master. The message was unmistakable. Never again would Burkina Faso's destiny be decided in distant capitals. Some called this audacity reckless. Others called it naive. Yet for millions across Africa, it became a beacon, proof that dignity can be claimed, not begged for. The old story, Africa as a chessboard for outsiders, is breaking apart piece by piece. Burkina Faso now stands as living evidence that the will to define, to build, and to defend still belongs to Africans themselves. The question now is not whether Africa can rise, but whether the world is willing to see it. Will you cling to outdated narratives or admit what is unfolding before your eyes? This is not just the struggle of one nation. It is about the meaning of self-determination, a people who no longer seek permission, but command respect. Your understanding stands at a crossroads. Will you recognize this new era of African agency, or stay trapped in familiar scripts? Power is shifting, right now, in plain sight. The choice is yours. Bear witness, or be left behind.